That's good.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. Stephanie here. Welcome to today's BOM announcement. Thank you for joining. We have Bethany behind camera again. So if you have any questions, you can just type it in the chat and she'll be providing some resources or answering some quick questions. And if there's anything more in depth, I can definitely answer that for everyone. So we're finally in the summer season now, and it's starting to warm up in Calgary. I'm not sure how it is where you guys are from, but if you want to put down where you're from, we always love seeing where everyone's joining us at. So today's main focus again will be the block of the month. And if you guys are in our Facebook group, you'll know that on June 1st we actually released our new block, which is the highly anticipated Toucan. So like May, I'm gonna be doing a quick unboxing of what is inside, some tips on how to layer this guy together, and again some ideas about how I created the stitching design for this and why I decided to incorporate this flower here, as well as putting more seed stitches in here compared to the other designs. So without further ado, I'm just going to switch the camera angle to this top-down view right here. Before I dive into this block, I again just want to give a reminder for those people that are new and maybe thinking about joining the block of the month, or you're new to the whole thing in general. We do have pre-made thread boxes that help with embellishing our blocks. So one will contain our solid colors of eleganza, and one will contain our variegated colors of eleganza. And all 18 of these threads are used throughout the quilt to embellish all the birds and the branches and the leaves and the flowers. And more importantly, too, is we actually also have Alana. Alana is a wool thread, and this is what we're using to actually applique all the pieces of wool onto the wool background. And if you didn't know before, all our Alana thread is actually dyed to match 100% the wool. So the wool thread 100% matches the wool fabric, which is really nice when you're appliquing to give a really nice and seamless finish. So I'm just going to put this in the center. And as you can see here, we have our little friend, the toucan, and it incorporates a variety of stitches that we've learned the last couple months. The new element that you'll notice this month is this flower here, and this is just a collection of pistol stitches. So when you receive your block of the month, you'll again get a little bit of a description on what it is. You'll have all the threads that are required this month, as well as the applique threads, Alana, that I just previously mentioned right there, to give you an idea of how many threads you might want to plan out if you already have some eleganza at home. All right. So it comes in a little book with a high resolution image at the front. That's a 1-to-1 size of the actual block, which is really, really helpful. You can really see the stitching detail as well as which direction some stitches go. For example, we have some chain stitches here, but actually they're going in different directions. So I'll hold some closer up in a bit to show you. When we first open it up, you can see our friend Mr. Toucan here. He looks a little bit discombobulated because he's not quite appliqued down yet. But let me just pull him aside and show you what to expect in your book. So again, you're going to get the diagram here with the legend of all the stitches. Another chart here that says which threads should be used in this block and which ones we recommend, as well as the needle sizes, which is very, very helpful because there are two main needles that we're recommending, which is the Wonderful embroidery needle or if you have a chenille 22 needle or a milliner's number 3 or a sharp's number 3. It's kind of like a bigger and longer needle to help you really get those embroidery stitches nice and even. Then on the left side here, we have the actual instructions written out. Everything bolded is something you want to pay a little bit more attention to, such as appliquing the wool pieces and making sure that you're matching the Alana colors and layering it properly. So we have the Alana colors here, and then all these bolded words here are the special types of embroidery stitches. So let me just move this back to the side and bring our friend back to the center. So what I generally like to do is take everything off. Let me just try to center this a little bit better for you guys. I generally like to take everything off and then put it down first so I get a good idea of how I want it to look. So that usually begins with the branch because more often than not, the branch is centered in this project. Then we have the body of our toucan right here. So now I'm seeing the head is a little bit too close to the top. I'll just bring everything down a bit like so. And I always say in the instructions to be mindful of the layering because that will actually play a big part in how your final bird will look. So for example, if I just butted up the edges of the wool together, you end up with a really, really super long beak. So what's actually been done here is the orange and the black piece are side by side. And I'm just going to zoom in a tiny bit so you guys can see. Let's see. Like so. Is that in focus? Okay, so we have the orange and black piece right here. And actually, this pink piece is overlapping slightly, like so. So your orange piece is actually going to look a bit square instead of rectangular. See, if I put it there, you end up with like a super long beak, but you can actually just butt it up and butt it up here and overlap where that pink piece is. So you get more of a squared off look like this toucan. Then the next thing you want to add is the eye color here, or the feathers around the eye, I should say. And again, this just goes on top of the black piece right there. And last but not least, you add the little eye, and there's your toucan. So you always want to remember that you're appliquing from the back to the front, and whatever is on the back will have to go down first in order for you to layer it correctly. So in this case, it would have to be probably the orange piece, the branch, and then the pink and black piece, and your last ones would be, of course, this white piece right here, and then the eye. In terms of the actual order of how you want to do the embellishments, that part doesn't really matter as much. You can start a little bit here and then finish somewhere else on the block, but the layering of how it's appliqued is going to be an important thing to be mindful of. So I'm just going to move my Mr. Toucan off to the side and show you more of a close-up of the actual toucan right here. And this is again a little bit zoomed in so you guys can see some of the detail. As I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to use these scissors. I have 3 rows of chain stitch. They're actually going in different directions like so. And that just adds a little bit more interest to the area. And I've actually also added some seed stitching onto the toucan, and that's quite different than the previous birds because the embellishment was a little bit simpler. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be leveling up each block so you're learning something every time. And in this case, we have some larger seed stitches for the stomach area. And then we actually have these really tiny ones right here in the color pink and in this color right here. Oops. So it actually is a really close match to the wool color, but if you look closely, it just looks like little confetti and it adds some texture to the actual beak itself, and that's why I decided to do that. Um, and I saw a comment on Facebook already when we debuted the new pieces that our little friend here looks a little bit hairy, and I would have to definitely agree with that. It was a point of me stitching it out and thinking, "Oh, do I leave it like this or should I replace it with a different type of stitch?" But actually, the longer I looked at it, the more I kind of liked how it kind of looked a little bit hairy, especially with the variegated eleganza thread. This one is Easy M1068 right here. And it's actually a really cool variegation with browns and blues and greens. And that is a really nice contrast along the black here. And this is all just a fly stitch. And although this was unintentional, the variegation lined up really well. So if you looked like in this horizontal way, the dark blue lines up, the light blue lines up, and the green lines up. And that's something you can play with too when you're doing your embroidery at home, is moving around which piece of variegated thread you want to start at so that you get repeated variegation, or you can actually diversify it a bit more. But the brand new stitch of this block is actually the flower, like I mentioned earlier. And this is just a collection of pistol stitches that are all layered up. So I always like to say, if you know how to do a French knot and you know how to do just a regular straight stitch, you'll be able to do a pistol stitch. It's a really simple stitch, but the fun thing about this one is it's layered. So there's actually 3 layers of pistol stitch going on here, which is kind of what makes it kind of interesting and more fun to do and more interesting to look at. So we have a bit of a new setup this video to help stabilize the camera and the stitching. So let us know if you prefer me holding the fabric or us using this tool here. So I'm just going to move some things around so you guys can get a better look at this. There we go. Okay. All right. So all I've done here is used actually, let me just zoom in or zoom out a tiny bit. See if that focuses better. I think that looks a little bit better. Okay. So all I've done is used a iron away pen. So my favorite one is the friction pen, and I kind of drew like a bit of a Wi-Fi looking symbol, and that's just to mark where my flower is going to be. So this one's a little bit of a mini version, but if you look back at the original and I turn it the same way, this is kind of where those Wi-Fi looking lines were, where the white is, where the yellow is, where the orange is. So that's just kind of a guide that we're going to use to create the flower. And we tried our best to emulate this in the directions when we were writing up our instructions. So this would be like the final look. First, you want to create the top layer of pistol stitches, add your second layer here, and add your third layer here. And I would say a point to highlight is when you're doing your third layer, all your pistol stitches are coming from one point, and that's where your stem will connect to later. But I think seeing it like this and marking it out like this is a little bit more helpful. That's how I did it when I was initially putting together the bird. So we're just going to do a little bit of stitching. I am going to start in the middle just to show you, hopefully nice and clear, how we do the pistol stitch. So I'm starting just from where that line is right there. I always like to hold my thread here. If you're right-handed, I hold this piece along here with my left hand. I'll put my needle kind of in this position, the same way I would do for a French knot. I wrap it around twice, like so. And in a French knot, I would pretty much put it right next to where I came up. But with a pistol stitch, you're actually going to carry it a distance away, put it in, and it's important to keep a little bit of tension on this thread right here so you don't get a really loose knot, and you just pull it through like so. And there's your first pistol stitch, like this. So I'm just going to continue doing a few here. And I chose a gradient of yellows, but of course you can choose whichever colors of thread you want to do, if you want it light to dark or dark to light. And something I like about the pistol stitch too is it's really a glorified French knot. You're just pretty much putting the needle back into a different spot instead of where you came up. And usually for my first go around, I won't actually put them too tight together. I'll keep like a little bit of distance between each one and then get an idea of where I need to fill in the space. I'm just going to put one more down here, holding it with my left hand. The needle is up here, 1, 2, and then we're just going to poke it a little bit of a distance away, like so. And now I'm just going to fill in some gaps that I see here. And don't worry, it doesn't need to be super tight because we're going to have some overlapping. So just a little bit to fill in the space here. Can you use thread in a serger or is it too linty? So I just see a question about using thread in the serger. I'm assuming you're meaning cotton. Yes, you can absolutely use this type of thread in the serger. We had a whole series dedicated to serging, I believe in April, was it? Because that was National Serging Month. And so we have all sorts of videos talking about using cotton thread, rayon thread, poly thread, all sorts of thread in the serger. So I definitely check that out if you're interested about some serging videos. Let's see. Popping in to say hello. Oh, great. Thank you, Artistic Artifacts, for coming in too. And if you guys are looking for where to grab the block of the month, you can sign up with our newsletter to get the pattern. And you can also check out Artistic Artifacts as well. They're also selling the wool block of the month. And I'm pretty sure they have like a little stitch club going on too. So there's a community there as well. And I strongly, strongly recommend joining the Facebook group. There's so much inspiration there. A lot of people are resizing the birds, and if you didn't know, this project actually has a companion pattern that's foundation paper piecing. So I know if you're here, you're watching this because of handwork, but I would definitely recommend trying out the foundation paper piecing as well. It's not too difficult. And again, all the patterns are free for foundation paper piecing. We talk a lot about using Deco Bob or a finer weight thread in order to achieve a better result and get those really flat seams. So I'm just going to put one more pistol stitch right in between here. And as you can see, my little Wi-Fi lines were not that big, but as you stitch, you can kind of widen out your flower however much you want. I'm just going to put it right here and pull it back down right there. And so usually what I'd like to do is I'm just going to take it out of this and I will thread the needle underneath a few of the stitches just to secure it. And if I feel like it's not quite secure, I'll just like put in a little bit of a knot. So let me just do that. Resecure this on. And I made this side a little bit denser than I did that side, but that's okay. I'm just going to grab my second thread. This is EZM1079. This is a thread color that is included in your thread box if you did get the variegated eleganza tin box collection. I saw too there's already a few people that have this completed. They beat me before I could even do any tutorial on this, so I'm glad that it's easy-ish to follow, and then, it's not too difficult to do. So, with the second one, we're gonna start on our second line, our little second Wi-Fi line, as you can see right here. I just started at the end this time. I pull the thread up, do the same thing, wrap it around my needle twice. You can always wrap it around 3 times if you prefer a bulkier knot at the end, and then I'll just pick a spot to overlap, and I'll just put it in. Yeah, simple as that. So I just go around and fill in the gaps where I see them. Like so. Let me pull this back to the center a little bit. And I'm doing this on a hoop with a cotton stitching fabric. But of course, when you're doing this with wool, I didn't necessarily use a hoop, but I did put a pin cushion underneath my work. So when I do get to the stage, let me show you right here. So when I do get to the stage of needing to put my thread down, I can actually stab it into the pin cushion like this, and it'll help stabilize my needle before I pull it through, instead of having to put your needle on the table or something like that, because I know that's not always ideal and it doesn't always give you the best result either. So again, I'm just kind of going equal distances away. And then I'm going to go back in the other direction and just fill in some gaps. And because I used an iron away pen, you don't have to be too worried if you see some of your lines peeking through. Once you hit it with the iron, those should just disappear. And sometimes people ask me if I iron my embroidery projects. If it's wool, typically I won't. The only reason I would is to get rid of lines like this. And I will always iron from the back of the project, not the front, because eleganza and all pearl cottons actually have a round shape to them. And that's what differentiates it from like a floss thread. A floss thread is already flat, simply due to how it's twisted. A pearl cotton is always going to be round. So if you hit it with the iron on top, you might actually flatten out some of those knots and change the shape of the thread a little bit by flattening it. So I'm pretty happy with the fullness so far. I'm just going to put one more right here. Like so. And we have our second layer done. And as you can see here, my top layer is a little bit more loosey-goosey, a little more irregular. And then my second layer here is a bit more uniform. And that's just to show you can really keep it however you want. When I did the original one, I actually flattened out the top a bit more. If I were to go back, I'd probably make it a little bit more round. But there's no really right or wrong way to go about this. This is just to show you some options. So I just threaded the thread behind there. And now I'm going to put my last thread color in, which is one of my favorites. This is the Wonderful Eleganza 904. And all of these are number 8 weight. which is our thinnest pearl cotton weight. We also have it in number 5 and number 3. And if you go back to watch some of the other stitching tutorials, I stitched the same stitch out in all 3 different sizes, so you can gain a better understanding of what it might look like. But for all the stitches in the Birdwatcher quilt, it's all with number 8 eleganza. All right. So I have my needle threaded. And I know another common question that we often get is whether or not I put a knot at the end, and I do. Sometimes it just helps me not pull the thread through, especially if I'm working on wool. That's a really nice aspect is the loft of the wool itself really hides the fact that there might be some knots in the back. I'll show you the back of my toucan in a minute. But you can take a look. I do have knots in the back of it. If you're doing things like cross stitching or you're working on thinner fabric, then you'd have to use different methods of burying your the beginning of your thread just so it doesn't create a bump or a lump somewhere. So the main point to highlight again is on your last row while you're finishing up their flower, you're going to be starting from a similar spot, if not the same spot. And that's where your stem will be connected. And a fun thing I thought about just now is if you want to hide where your pinpoint is here, if you guys did the hummingbird block already, we did some satin stitching at the base of the flower to hide some of the thread where the tassel began. And that kind of creates a bud look. It looks like the bud of the flower. So you can definitely do that as well to clean things up a bit if you're not liking the look of all these threads coming out of one spot. So now I kind of have good coverage. I'm just going to add a few shorter ones because it's going to be my last layer. Just here and there. Like so. I'm going to put one more on the other end here. All right. And this is kind of a speed round of the flower I did, but of course you can finesse it however you want. And like I mentioned, you can probably do a little bit of a satin stitch in the base here with the green to make it look like the bud or where the flower begins, where the petals begin. I think that would look really nice too. But essentially, that is the concept of how the pistol stitch flower is put together. It looks little bit challenging when you're reading the instructions, but really, I think if you plan it out a little bit with a iron away marker or some sort of fabric marker, it's a lot easier to put together. So I'm just going to take this off. Oops. As you can see here, this is what the back looks like. And then I'm actually going to show you what the back of the toucan looks like as well. All right. So we have the toucan here, and I'm just going to zoom out a bit. All right. Okay. So this is the toucan block. We got the flower here. And when I turn it around, as you can see, most of this is my applique stitches actually, where you see like the hard line around the toucan. And then a lot of times when there's pieces that are layered, I actually don't go through the whole back, fully stab it through and fully come back up. If I pull this up, you'll see that's where the chain stitches are. And I'm really just going through the top layer of wool fabric, and I might catch it every now and then, but I often don't go through the full thing unless I really want that like bubbly trapunto effect and I want the full puff of the wool. But again, here is the flower. And then I have knots around the back of my piece. And when I end off, sometimes I'll just wrap it a few times under the previous stitches and tie it off. And that's how I finish it. But essentially, that is the new stitch that is in the toucan. Let me just switch. There we go. So essentially that's the new stitch that's in the toucan block. Again, it's pretty straightforward. I know you guys can do a great job as I follow the Facebook page really closely and I see what you guys do. And a lot of you guys are even doing this on cotton fabric, which I think is a new challenge in itself because you really get an idea of how hard to pull the thread if you need to reinforce the cotton thread with maybe another piece of fabric or something like that. But there's so much good inspiration on that page that this is going to be a breeze for you guys. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys next month because month by month, we're going to keep soaring our skills and elevating, and we're going to be learning new different stitches. And as you can see here, this one was not that difficult at all. So thank you guys again so much for joining. I hope you have fun stitching away and sharing your projects. We're so excited about the month of June. And a little announcement too is you can expect some months to have 2 block reveals. So stay tuned for that as well. I'll see you guys soon. And we're going to be releasing some videos for a more close-up version of how to do the pistol stitch if that's what you're having troubles with. There's a lot of resources too on the previous existing stitches too. You just need to go to the videos tab of the Facebook page. So again, thank you guys so much. I hope to see you guys again. Bye.